The sky above Earth was clear, but something was different. The stars, usually so peaceful, began to flicker with strange lights. The humans didn't notice at first. Life went on as normal. People went to work, children played outside, and the world seemed peaceful. But in the darkness of space, something huge was approaching. An alien fleet, unseen by any human eye, was speeding toward Earth. No one expected what was about to happen. The aliens from a distant galaxy had watched Earth from afar. They believed humans were weak, primitive creatures with no real power. They thought the Earth was just another small, unimportant planet. They were wrong. The fleet was massive, with ships that could dwarf even the tallest buildings on Earth. They had advanced technology, weapons that could destroy entire cities with a single blast. The aliens didn't care about diplomacy or negotiation. They had decided Earth was theirs. Their plan was simple: land, take control, and rule. The first sign that something was wrong came early one morning. It was a normal day, the sun rising just like any other. Then, out of nowhere, a bright flash of light appeared in the sky. At first, people thought it was just a meteor or some strange weather event. But when the flash grew larger, when the skies turned dark as if the sun had been covered by an enormous shadow, the panic began. Across the globe, people stared up in shock. Strange ships filled the sky, blocking out the sun, casting huge shadows over the cities below. It was unlike anything anyone had ever seen. They looked nothing like the ships of human technology. These were sleek, dark, and frightening. The world's governments scrambled to respond, but it was too late. The ships landed in major cities around the world, and the first wave of aliens emerged. They looked tall, their bodies covered in shining armor, with weapons that could disintegrate anything in their path. They spoke in a language no one understood, but their intentions were clear. Earth was now their territory. The human military was on high alert, ready to protect their homes, but their weapons were useless against the aliens. The aliens' technology was far more advanced. The humans had nothing that could stand against them. In just a few hours, the invaders had established a stronghold in the center of every major city. The world's greatest armies, with their tanks and guns, were no match for the alien might. As the aliens marched through the cities, they didn't expect much resistance. They were confident, almost arrogant. They had conquered other worlds before, and this one would be no different. Humans, in their eyes, were a weak species, easy to control and dominate. But what the aliens didn't know was that Earth itself had a secret, one that had been hidden for millions of years. At first, the humans did not know how to fight back. Their cities were occupied, their leaders captured, and their soldiers were outmatched. But there was something in the air, a strange energy that no one could explain. People began to feel it. It was as if the Earth was alive, aware of what was happening. And deep beneath the surface of the planet, something stirred. The humans were scared, but they were not giving up. In the midst of fear, something ancient awoke. It was not something the aliens had planned for. It wasn't a weapon or a fleet of ships. It was the will of humanity itself. The humans, despite their weaknesses, refused to surrender. They fought with everything they had, using their knowledge, their creativity, and most of all, their spirit. In the cities, small groups of humans began to organize. They didn't have advanced weapons, but they had something that no alien force could understand: determination. They fought back with everything they had: cars, makeshift weapons, and their sheer will to survive. They were not going down without a fight. The aliens, seeing the resistance, began to grow concerned. They had expected a quick and easy victory, but now they were starting to realize that this planet might not be as easy to conquer as they had thought. They had underestimated the humans. They had underestimated Earth. In the first hours of the invasion, the aliens had easily controlled the cities. But now, in the streets, in the alleys, the humans were pushing back. It wasn't much, but it was enough to send a message. Earth was not going down without a fight. The invaders didn't understand it. How could such a weak species resist so fiercely? It was something the aliens had never seen before. They had conquered countless worlds, but never had they faced an enemy like this. It was then that the aliens realized that they had made a huge mistake. They thought Earth was just another planet to conquer. They thought humans were tame and powerless. But they were wrong. The planet and its people were not as weak as they seemed. As the first wave of alien forces began to regroup, something shifted. The people of Earth, scattered and fearful, began to unite. They didn't have the technology or the numbers to face the aliens in a traditional battle. But they had something more powerful: their unshakable will to protect their home. They had no idea what was coming next, but one thing was certain: they would not give up without a fight. The invasion had just begun, but Earth was far from helpless. The aliens had made a grave mistake, and they were about to learn just how powerful humanity could be. The alien forces, though vastly superior in technology, began to feel a strange unease. What they had expected to be an easy conquest of Earth was quickly becoming something they hadn't prepared for. After the first few days of overwhelming force, the invaders were surprised to find themselves facing pockets of resistance. What was worse, the humans, whom they had deemed weak and disorganized, were not surrendering as expected. Across the world, the situation was dire. Cities were under siege, with alien troops patrolling the streets, their weapons blazing with unrelenting power. But amid the chaos, humans fought back. They were outgunned and outnumbered, yet their spirit seemed unbreakable. Resistance groups, formed from soldiers, civilians, and even children, attacked alien patrols wherever they could, using whatever they could find. They had no hope of winning in traditional combat, but they fought like their very existence depended on it. And in a way it did. The invaders had always relied on their technology, thinking it would be enough to control every planet they encountered. Their weapons could shatter buildings, and their ships could obliterate entire cities from orbit. But they didn't know Earth. They didn't understand the resilience of its people. They didn't understand what it meant to fight for something that wasn't just survival. It was about protecting everything they had ever known. One evening, as the sun set over a war-torn city, a small group of human fighters gathered in secret, ready to carry out a risky operation. Armed with nothing but basic weapons and a few stolen alien devices, they planned to sabotage one of the alien command centers. The odds were against them. The alien technology was powerful, and every step they took could lead to disaster. But there was something burning in their hearts, a fire they could not ignore. The humans knew they didn't have the advantage of strength, but they had something far more valuable: their adaptability. They could learn, improvise, and survive. And while the aliens had superior weapons, they didn't understand Earth's terrain, its weather, or the very air that humans breathed. The humans knew how to use the environment to their advantage, how to turn the land itself into an ally. And that's exactly what they did. They began with small acts of sabotage, disrupting alien communication lines, cutting off supply routes, and planting explosives in key locations. Every victory, no matter how small, added fuel to their fight. The aliens had thought that Earth was a simple world, easy to conquer with a little force. But what they didn't realize was that Earth itself had a heartbeat, a force stronger than anything they could imagine. As days passed, strange things started to happen. In cities all over the world, the human resistance began to show signs of something more. At first, it was just odd. Machines malfunctioning, alien equipment breaking down for no apparent reason. But soon, it became clear. Earth itself seemed to be pushing back. The very soil under the aliens' feet seemed to resist their presence. Plant life began to grow unnaturally fast in the alien fortresses, trapping the invaders in their own strongholds. Weather patterns began to shift unexpectedly, causing storms and winds that battered the alien ships. The aliens began to notice something they hadn't expected. Earth wasn't just fighting back through its people. The planet itself was reacting to the invasion. Earth had its own strength, a strength that had been dormant for centuries, and now it was awakening. The invaders, who had once laughed at the idea of a planet having a will of its own, found themselves faced with an enemy they couldn't understand. Human resistance fighters began to make their way into alien bases, armed with nothing more than courage and makeshift weapons. They had no sophisticated weaponry, no advanced technology, but they had something the aliens didn't: a sense of unity. They worked together, pooling their knowledge, skills, and resources. They didn't care about their individual safety. Every human knew that this fight was not just for themselves. It was for the future of Earth. And that made them stronger than anything the invaders could throw at them. The aliens, on the other hand, had never fought this way. Their forces were trained to crush entire armies in moments, to eliminate any resistance with sheer force. But here, in the midst of this human fight, they found themselves at a loss. They couldn't predict the humans' actions. They didn't understand their tactics. They had underestimated humanity's will to survive and fight for their home. In one key moment, as an alien patrol attempted to march through a small town, they were ambushed. The humans had set up a series of traps, carefully planned and executed with precision. The aliens, with their superior armor and weapons, fell into the traps, and the resistance fighters struck swiftly. They didn't have the firepower to defeat the invaders head-on, but they had the element of surprise, and that was enough to send a clear message. Humans were not to be underestimated. The aliens began to panic. They had expected this invasion to be over in a matter of days. Instead, it was dragging on. The human spirit was proving to be a formidable force, one that no alien fleet had ever encountered. And with each passing day, the human resistance grew stronger, more organized, more dangerous. The invaders, who had once believed they would dominate Earth easily, now found themselves questioning whether they had made the right choice. Were humans really as weak as they had thought? It was clear to the aliens now that Earth was not just a simple planet. It was a world filled with surprises, and humans were far more than they had ever imagined. The fight for Earth had just begun, and the aliens were starting to realize that they might not be the ones to win this war. As the days passed, the tension on Earth reached new heights. The humans, still fighting against overwhelming odds, began to show signs of something far greater than resistance. It was as if the planet itself was joining the fight. The weather grew unpredictable. Storms struck without warning, and unusual shifts in temperature began to occur in places that never experienced such extremes. Earth was changing, but in a way no one could explain. The aliens had always believed their technology would be enough to dominate every world they encountered, but now they were facing something completely unexpected. Earth had its own hidden force, a force that humans had long forgotten but now, unknowingly, were awakening. Deep beneath the surface of the planet, far from the sight of the alien invaders, something stirred. The ancient forgotten powers of Earth were beginning to emerge. It was not a force that could be seen, nor was it something that could be easily explained. But it was there, and it was powerful. A power that had remained dormant for millions of years was now slowly coming back to life, responding to the desperation of the humans and the threats from the invaders. It was as if the very land itself had been waiting for the moment when it could rise and defend its people. The first signs of this strange power began in the wildest corners of the planet. Areas once thought to be just normal wilderness became strange, almost magical places. Ancient forests began to grow at an alarming rate, roots burrowing deep into the earth, strengthening the soil. Mountains seemed to shift, subtly altering the landscape, and vast stretches of land that had once been dry began to sprout with life. But these were just the early signs. What happened next was even more unexpected. In a remote desert region, a group of resistance fighters was attempting to sabotage an alien supply depot when something strange happened. As they set up explosives near an alien vehicle, the ground beneath their feet began to shake. At first, they thought it was just an aftershock from the ongoing war, But the rumble grew stronger. The ground cracked open, and from deep below the surface, a massive force shot up, sending a great burst of sand and rock into the air. It wasn't a natural event. Something had been awakened, and it wasn't happy. The aliens, watching from their nearby base, immediately sent a team to investigate. They didn't expect much, just another minor threat to deal with. But when they arrived, they were met with something they hadn't seen before. A massive sandstorm, much larger than anything the planet had ever experienced, roared through the area. It swept through the alien vehicles, stripping away their armor and disabling their technology. The storm seemed alive, as if the Earth itself had decided to fight back. The aliens, unprepared for this kind of attack, retreated in panic. They had underestimated Earth, and now they were beginning to realize that their conquest was not going to be as easy as they had thought. Back in the cities, the human resistance had also begun to notice strange occurrences. Some soldiers reported hearing a low, rumbling sound beneath the ground, almost like a heartbeat. In one city, a building that had been on the brink of collapse suddenly stabilized, as if the very foundations were being reinforced from below. In another area, a group of civilians found that their home, once destroyed in the initial wave of the invasion, was slowly being rebuilt. It was as though Earth was helping them, giving them strength when they needed it most. As more and more of these unusual events occurred, a strange realization began to form among the humans. Perhaps it wasn't just their will to fight that was keeping them going. It was Earth itself. The planet had been quiet for so long, but now it was waking up, responding to the threats in its own way. The question now was whether the aliens could even comprehend what was happening. The invaders, growing increasingly confused and frustrated, began to realize that their technology was no longer as reliable as it once was. The storms, the shifting terrain, and the strange occurrences were taking a toll on their ships and weapons. The alien fleets, once unstoppable, were now experiencing frequent malfunctions. The power that Earth was slowly revealing was too unpredictable for the invaders to counter. Their ships started to lose power, their weapons malfunctioned, and even their advanced communication systems began to fail. At the same time, the humans were learning to adapt to these changes. They began to harness the power of the land, using the environment to their advantage. Resistance groups started to incorporate natural elements into their strategies, building traps in the forests, using the shifting sands of the desert to hide their movements, and even utilizing the powerful storms to launch surprise attacks. They didn't have advanced alien technology, but they didn't need it. They had something much stronger, the heart of the Earth itself. The planet was no longer simply a battlefield. It was becoming a weapon. The humans, with their deep connection to the land, began to feel as though they were part of something much larger than themselves. As the resistance grew, so did the power of the planet. Earth wasn't just fighting back. It was using its ancient energy to protect its people. The aliens, who had thought that their advanced technology would ensure their victory, were now faced with a force they could not understand. They had underestimated the planet and its people, and now they were paying the price. What they thought would be an easy conquest had turned into a war against something much older, much stronger, and far more unpredictable than they could have ever imagined. And as the humans stood together, fighting not just for their survival, but for their home, they began to realize that the true strength of humanity wasn't in their technology or weapons. It was in their bond with Earth, a bond that had been forged over millennia and was now stronger than ever. The invasion was far from over, but now the aliens knew that they were up against something far more powerful than they had ever imagined. Earth had awoken, and it was ready to defend its people. The aliens, once so confident in their victory, began to understand that they had made a grave mistake. Earth was not just a planet. They were learning the hard way that the planet was alive in a way they hadn't expected. The constant environmental shifts, the strange phenomena occurring at every turn, were not just random occurrences. Earth itself was beginning to fight back. The invaders had always relied on their technology, their overwhelming firepower, and their advanced weapons, but they had never fought a battle like this. One of the largest alien ships, which had been hovering above a major city, suddenly began to experience severe turbulence. The ship's systems began to malfunction inexplicably. Its propulsion systems sputtered as if something deep inside the planet was interfering. The ship's advanced shields flickered, and the engines began to overheat. The crew was thrown into disarray as alarms blared across the bridge. They had no idea what was happening, and in their panic, they could only retreat. But it was too late. A massive earthquake, unlike any the humans had ever felt, shook the ground beneath them, sending shockwaves that hit the alien ship with such force that it was forced to crash. This was no accident. The Earth, in its way, had recognized the threat and had decided to act. The aliens had underestimated the power of the planet, and now they were reaping the consequences of their ignorance. As the invasion pressed on, more alien ships and forces began to experience similar problems. Even their advanced weaponry was beginning to malfunction. The energy readings were erratic, the communication systems static-filled, and their transport ships were losing fuel at an alarming rate. Earth's very core seemed to be fighting back, pushing against the alien invaders with a force that they couldn't explain. The human resistance, sensing the change in the air, began to take advantage of this new opportunity. They had already been using the planet's natural resources to their advantage, but now, with the very land working with them, the situation began to turn in their favor. The storms that had started to form in the earlier days of the invasion grew stronger, fiercer. What had once been mere weather patterns were now full-scale forces of nature. Torrential rainstorms, violent winds, and unseasonable snowfalls began to flood the alien strongholds, trapping their soldiers in places they thought were secure. The advanced technology that the invaders had relied upon to shield them from the elements could no longer protect them from the planet's fury. In one city, the humans had been hiding out in the underground tunnels, planning their next move. Suddenly, the ground beneath them trembled, not in fear, but in power. A massive rupture opened up in the earth, sending rocks and debris flying into the air. But instead of panic, the humans saw opportunity. The explosion seemed to be guiding them, revealing hidden paths through the city that had once been abandoned and forgotten. They knew that this was no random event. It was Earth showing them the way. The planet was fighting alongside them, and it had a plan that the aliens could not foresee. The human resistance fighters quickly adapted. They began to move in greater numbers, using the terrain to trap and disorient the invaders. They knew how to use the environment to their advantage, how to blend in with the changing landscape and use the storms to shield their movements. The once predictable tactics of the alien forces now seemed useless. The aliens, despite their advanced weapons, had never learned to adapt like the humans had. One day, a large group of alien soldiers was marching through a dense forest when the ground beneath them suddenly gave way. They had walked right into a trap, one set by humans who had been waiting in the trees above. As the soldiers fell into the cavernous hole that opened up beneath them, the humans launched an attack from all sides. They used the natural camouflage of the forest, their intimate knowledge of the terrain, to overwhelm the invaders. The aliens, who had expected a quick and easy conquest, found themselves bogged down in the very land they had tried to control. In another region, a massive alien vehicle that had been rolling through the desert suddenly sank into the sand. At first, the soldiers inside believed it was a malfunction, but soon they realized that the very sand beneath them was shifting, like it was alive. The desert itself seemed to be pulling them into its depths, trapping them in a suffocating grave. The humans, having studied the shifting dunes, had long since figured out how to use the terrain to their advantage. The sands were no longer just desert. They were a weapon against the invaders. The aliens were now realizing that Earth was not just a passive planet. It was fighting back in ways they could never have imagined. They had thought they could conquer this world with their technology, but the very land they stood on had begun to fight them. The planet's natural forces were unpredictable and unyielding, making it almost impossible for the invaders to maintain control. The humans, recognizing the vulnerability of the aliens, seized the opportunity to strike. They launched a series of attacks against the alien base, using the very terrain to their advantage. They knew the weaknesses of the land, how to move through the shifting earth, how to use the cracks in the ground to hide, and how to turn the environment into a trap. The aliens, disoriented and struggling to maintain control, were overwhelmed by the guerrilla tactics of the human fighters. The once mighty alien base was reduced to rubble in a matter of hours, and the invaders were forced to retreat once again. As the weeks went by, the tide of battle began to shift. The human resistance was no longer just a group of scattered fighters. They had become a well-organized force, with the land itself as their ally. The alien invaders, who had believed they could crush humanity with ease, were now facing a war they didn't understand. Their technology was failing them, and Earth itself was proving to be an unpredictable and deadly adversary. But the aliens were not willing to give up. They had learned to adapt, and now they were using their technology in new ways, trying to find a way to counter the unexpected forces of the planet. They began to study the strange phenomena that had been occurring, how the storms seemed to form without warning, how the Earth itself appeared to shift and tremble when they were near. They sent teams of scientists and engineers to analyze the planet's core, hoping to understand what was happening and how they could control it. What they found was beyond their comprehension. The planet's core was not just a source of energy. It was something far more powerful, far more complex. It was as if Earth itself had a consciousness, a will to protect its inhabitants. The more they tried to probe its depths, the more the planet fought back, refusing to yield its secrets. The humans, on the other hand, were beginning to realize the true power of Earth. They knew that the planet was not just a passive participant. It was an active force, one that could be harnessed to defeat the invaders. As they learned to work with the planet, they discovered new ways to channel its energy, using the land itself as a weapon. The humans, once powerless in the face of the alien onslaught, now had an advantage they had never imagined. But with this new power came new challenges. The more the humans relied on the planet, the more they began to feel its energy coursing through them. It was a power they had never known, one that was both awe-inspiring and terrifying. They were connected to the Earth in ways they couldn't fully understand, and as they tapped into its strength, they began to realize that they were not just fighting for survival, they were fighting for the future of the planet itself. The aliens, unaware of the full extent of Earth's power, continued their assault. But as the humans and the planet worked together, they began to realize that this was no longer just a war between species, it was a war between civilizations. The alien invaders, with all their technology and advanced weapons, had underestimated the power of Earth, and now they were paying the price for their arrogance. With each passing day, the humans grew stronger, more confident in their ability to fight back. The invaders, on the other hand, were starting to lose their grip on the planet. Their ships were malfunctioning, their weapons were failing, and the very Earth beneath their feet seemed to be slipping away. They had thought they could conquer Earth, but now they were learning that it was Earth that was in control. The war was far from over, but one thing was clear: the humans had learned how to fight with the land, and that made them stronger than the aliens could ever imagine. The battle for Earth had become a battle for survival, not just of the humans, but of the planet itself. And as the invaders continued to struggle against the forces of nature, they began to realize that they had underestimated the true power of Earth and the true strength of humanity. The alien forces, once certain of their ultimate victory, were now in full retreat. The unpredictable nature of Earth, combined with the humans' newfound alliance with the planet, had turned the tide in an unexpected way. The invaders had never anticipated that a world they considered primitive would possess such a powerful, almost mystical resistance. But now, after weeks of constant struggle, the invaders were beginning to see their defeat as inevitable. Earth had become a force beyond their comprehension, and the humans, drawing from the very land beneath their feet, had become a formidable enemy. As the human resistance grew bolder, they began to move from one strategic location to another, always staying one step ahead of the alien forces. The storms, the shifting earth, and the violent changes in the climate had all become part of the humans' arsenal. They used every advantage the planet offered to launch surprise attacks, sabotage alien infrastructure, and confuse the invaders at every turn. What was once a planet filled with quiet cities and peaceful landscapes had transformed into a living, breathing weapon of war. In one of the central alien command posts, high above Earth's atmosphere, the leaders of the invasion met in a tense conference. Their once certain plans had been reduced to shambles, and they were running out of time. They had underestimated Earth in ways they couldn't have anticipated. Their technology, which had been enough to conquer countless worlds, was useless here. The very core of the planet was resisting them. And their weapons, so powerful in other environments, malfunctioned with alarming regularity. They needed a new plan, and fast. "We must strike directly at the source," the leader of the alien forces said, her voice cold and calculated. "We need to neutralize the planet's core. We cannot afford to let this continue any longer." The scientist at her side nodded, his face grim. "It's not just about the core. It's about the connection between the humans and the Earth itself. They had found a way to tap into the planet's power, to use it against us. We need to sever that connection if we want to stand a chance." The alien leaders knew that this would be their last attempt to break Earth's resistance, but the humans were not ignorant of the enemy's tactics. The more the aliens tried to understand and control Earth, the more they revealed their intentions. The human fighters had learned quickly, realizing that the aliens would not stop until they had neutralized the very force that had given them strength. Back on Earth, the resistance began to prepare for what they knew would be the final battle. They understood that the aliens would soon attempt a decisive strike, but they were not afraid. They had learned the ways of the land, and the land had taught them how to fight in ways no invader could understand. The humans no longer saw themselves as individuals fighting for survival. They saw themselves as protectors of Earth, wielding its power in the face of overwhelming odds. As the days passed, the alien ships began to move into position, preparing for their final assault. They had pinpointed the location of what they believed to be Earth's core of resistance, a vast, ancient forest where the most powerful of Earth's hidden energies seemed to converge. This forest had become a symbol for the humans, a place where the land itself seemed to pulse with life. The aliens believed that by destroying it, they could sever the connection between the humans and the planet. But what the aliens didn't know was that the forest was not the only place where Earth's power was concentrated. The humans had spent years studying the planet, understanding its forces, and learning to tap into its hidden energy. The forest was only a small part of the larger network that connected all of Earth's life. It was not the source of their strength, but a symbol, and as the resistance prepared to defend it, they knew that Earth's power ran through every living thing, from the smallest seed to the tallest mountain. The battle began in the early hours of the morning, with the sky above the forest darkening as the alien fleet descended. The humans, well aware of the alien strategy, had already prepared. The forest was not a place to hide. It was a place to fight. As the first alien ships touched down, the trees seemed to sway and creak, as if they were alive and aware of the approaching danger. The ground shook beneath the invaders' feet, and a deep rumble echoed from the depths of the earth. The humans, armed with nothing more than their knowledge of the land and their unbreakable will to survive, launched their first attack. The alien soldiers, expecting to face simple resistance, were immediately thrown into disarray. The trees themselves seemed to strike, branches like arms reaching out to grab and crush. The earth split open, revealing deep chasms that swallowed alien vehicles whole. The storms that had been brewing for days now roared to life, a torrential downpour of rain and wind that battered the invaders from all sides. The humans had learned to use the land like a weapon, and the aliens were helpless against it. What the invaders thought would be an easy victory turned into a desperate struggle for survival. The humans didn't need advanced technology. They had something far more powerful, a connection to the Earth itself. The alien fleet, now severely damaged, tried to retreat, but the planet's forces would not allow them to leave. The very ground beneath them seemed to rise up in defiance, pulling at their ships and forcing them to the surface. The skies darkened further, and massive lightning strikes tore through the air, striking alien ships from above. The humans, fighting with everything they had, pushed forward, knowing that this was their moment to finally defeat the invaders once and for all. But the aliens were not ready to give up. They had underestimated Earth, yes, but they had one final weapon, a massive energy cannon capable of destroying anything in its path. The leader of the alien forces gave the order, and the cannon powered up. A single, concentrated beam of energy shot toward the heart of the forest, aiming to destroy the very source of Earth's power. The beam streaked across the sky, a destructive force of unimaginable power. But as it neared its target, something unexpected happened. The ground beneath the cannon's path shifted, the Earth itself rising in defense. The beam, powerful as it was, struck a force field created by the very land, a shield that had been formed by the combined will of the humans and the planet. The energy deflected off, exploding in a brilliant burst of light, and the cannon systems overloaded, sending it into a catastrophic meltdown. With their final weapon now destroyed, the alien forces were defeated. Earth had won, not through technology, but through unity, with humanity and the planet working together as one. The aliens, overwhelmed and broken, had no choice but to retreat. They had come to conquer, but they had failed to understand the true power of Earth, and in that failure, they learned the hardest lesson of all. Earth was not a planet to be tamed. It was a planet to be respected, defended, and protected. As the dust began to settle, and the alien ships retreated into the skies, the humans stood victorious, though not without the toll of a long and hard-fought battle. Earth, once thought to be a passive, simple planet, had revealed its true power, and humanity had learned to harness it. They had not only survived but had triumphed against an advanced alien force. Yet despite the victory, the world was changed forever. The human survivors slowly emerged from their hiding places, their faces battered but determined. The forests that had once been a symbol of their fear were now a reminder of their strength. The once bustling cities, now abandoned and in ruins, were a testament to the sacrifices made to protect their home. But even as they mourned the loss of lives and places dear to them, there was a new sense of unity and purpose. The fight for Earth had brought humanity together like never before. They had learned not just to fight for survival, but to fight for something greater, something worth protecting. The planet itself, now seemingly at peace, had shifted in ways the humans could only begin to comprehend. The storms, which had once been destructive, now seemed to settle into a rhythm that was more like a heartbeat. The Earth itself seemed to pulse with life, as though it had become more alive, more aware of its place in the universe. The human resistance fighters, now hailed as heroes, understood that this was only the beginning of a new era, not just for humanity, but for Earth itself. In the aftermath of the alien invasion, the surviving alien forces had been scattered, their once mighty ships abandoned in the sky or left to crash on distant parts of the planet. Some tried to regroup, but they had been decimated in ways they could never have predicted. Earth's forces, its unpredictable storms, its unyielding terrain, its hidden energies, had defeated them. The alien leaders, having underestimated the true strength of the humans and their planet, had learned the hard way that Earth was not to be underestimated. But even as the survivors celebrated their hard-won victory, there were questions. What would happen now? The aliens had left, but their presence had left behind scars, both physical and emotional. The lands were changed, their landscapes altered by the violence of the invasion. The remnants of alien technology littered the world, leaving both opportunity and danger in its wake. And more importantly, the humans now understood that their relationship with Earth had changed forever. The connection between the humans and the planet had deepened in ways that were still not fully understood. The Earth, once seen as a passive backdrop to human life, was now an active participant in the fight for survival. The natural world had become an extension of humanity's strength, and the people realized that they had a responsibility to protect it as fiercely as they had protected their cities and families. Earth had chosen them as its allies, but that partnership was not without cost. Governments that had once been divided were now coming together, understanding that the survival of humanity and the survival of the Earth itself was more important than any political boundary. There was no room for division anymore. The people, having seen the strength of the planet and their own potential, began to rebuild their societies with a new perspective. The old ways of living, disconnected from the natural world, were no longer viable. The Earth had shown them the consequences of taking it for granted. And so, humanity began to rebuild not just their cities but their entire way of life. The lessons learned from the alien invasion were clear. The planet was not something to be controlled. It was something to be respected and cherished. The Earth was a partner in the fight for survival, and humanity had learned to work with it, not against it. The remaining alien technology, now in the hands of humanity, offered both the challenge and an opportunity. The humans, who had once relied on basic tools and rudimentary tactics, now found themselves with the knowledge to create weapons and technology far beyond their own. But the survivors knew they had to be careful. They had seen what the aliens could do with such power, and they understood the dangers of becoming too reliant on technology. They had learned the hard way that true strength came from unity, with each other, with the land, and with the planet they called home. As the years passed, the Earth continued to recover from the damage of the invasion. The storms that had once been violent and unpredictable now settled into a steady pattern, a reminder of the balance that had been restored. The forests, which had been torn apart during the war, slowly began to heal. The land itself, scared by the battle, slowly began to regenerate. Life returned, and with it, a renewed sense of hope. Humanity, now united under the banner of Earth's protection, forged a new era. The bonds between people grew stronger, not just through their shared struggle, but through their shared understanding of the planet's true power. The Earth was no longer a mere resource to exploit. It was a living, breathing entity, and humanity had learned to live in harmony with it. The human race, once divided and on the brink of destruction, had found its true strength not in its technology or its weapons, but in its ability to adapt, to unite, and to defend the very planet that had given them life. The story of the invasion became legend, a tale of how humanity overcame impossible odds and learned the true meaning of strength. But it was not a story of conquest. It was a story of survival, of respect, and of the incredible bond between Earth and its people. The invaders may have thought they could tame Earth, but in the end, it was Earth that had tamed them. And the humans, forever changed by the experience, vowed to protect their world for generations to come, ensuring that no force, alien or otherwise, would ever threaten their home again. The battle for Earth was over, but the fight to preserve it had only just begun.